Agency owners, this might be the most unsexy way to add 10 to 15% extra profit to your P&L per month. This flowchart helps you optimize your agency for capacity planning and forecasting, and ultimately adds 15% profit to your bottom line when done correctly. Really, what this comes down to is that we have to do a couple of things. Number one, have accurate revenue forecasting. Accurate revenue forecasting means that we're within a certain percentage of the actuals versus what we think is going to happen. And this begins with internal revenue. What does internal revenue actually look like? This is our ongoing accounts, potential upsells, any kind of retention, referral, those kinds of revenues are internal revenue. Okay. Then after that, we also need to take into consideration new business revenue. Okay. So this is brand new sales from clients that haven't done business with us. And the important thing is getting both consistently within 5% of actual. How do you figure this out? Well, if you forecast it before the month or a couple months out, and then you look at what you actually did after the fact, you're going to be able to see how consistent you actually are. And I'm going to walk you through how to actually do this step by step. The second thing, and this is really the thing that's a little bit harder, is accurate capacity forecasting. Accurate capacity forecasting makes revenue forecasting look easy. Why? Because as things get done for the clients, things move around. Projects could move around, clients miss deadlines, and we still need to be able to figure out how much capacity we have on a per individual basis, on a per role basis, departmentally, and as a company as a whole. And again, how we break this down is predicting how long things actually take to deliver in hours, meaning when we're doing a project, how many hours of this project are going to fall during our current month, if we have a project-based billing system, or if we have a monthly recurring system, how many hours are we going to deliver predictably for that client every single month? And any agency owner knows that this number fluctuates because no 2 months are identical when it comes to this amount of time to deliver. Okay. Again, similar to the revenue forecasting, we need the capacity report to be within 5% of actual consistently, meaning whatever we thought were the hours for the upcoming month before it starts. And then if we look at it in the rearview mirror, the forecast versus reality was within 5% of each other. This is what we were going to go for. And I'm going to walk you through step by step how to actually make this happen. Now, the hard thing about this is because each one of these is actually difficult on its own. And like digging a tunnel from both ends to meet perfectly in the middle, it's kind of like threading a very difficult needle. Okay. And if we don't hit both of these exactly right, we're going to miss. And if we miss, that means that we either have too many resources, which means that we have overpaid for resources, or if we are under-resourced, we're not going to be able to deliver the full amount of the revenue. Either way, it's going to affect our profitability. And this is why, in my experience, getting this right to these degrees enables anywhere from 10 to 15% or more in additional profit for a marketing agency. So let's start with the harder one, which is capacity planning. So like I said, we're going to begin with the harder one, which is capacity planning. And there's a lot of steps here. All right. So ultimately, what we want to do is have a great capacity forecast and a great revenue forecast. So we're going to tackle this one at a time. And what matters here is that we have this capacity forecast to within 5%, right, of overage month over month or less. Okay. And if that's true, that's great. We move into the revenue forecasting side. Now, if we don't have this, we actually have to make sure, and seems like a stupid thing. It's almost like turn your computer off and on. Are all your projects that have been scoped and all recurring projects actually in your project management system? Like, are you actually entering all the data correctly? I know it's a weird step, because it's so obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times this is actually the root cause of the entire problem. And again, once these all are in there, is the estimate actually matching? Yes or no? And then you move into the forecasting part. Now, if you don't have all of them, right? And your scope, you have to add all the scope in, add in the hours, all the tasks, and assign it to those people, right? Because think about it this way: if the goal is to understand how busy each individual role, department, and company are as a whole, what that means is that we need to understand at each one of those levels how busy people are, so we understand how much work we can give to each person by type, right? Because just because we have, for example, 20 new hours of work coming in for copywriting doesn't mean that we can automatically deliver them if we have 20 hours in the agency. It could be that all of our copywriting capacity is actually full up, but we have 20 hours of design time available. But that doesn't help us to do this kind of work. So having the breakdown of the type of work coming in and the type of work that we have available to do capacity for is really what matters here. Okay. If you fix all of this, right, and you have it detailed to that degree where it's by person and by role, it basically, here's where we check: are we still on track with our estimates or not? Because remember, if we're missing because we say like, well, we have 100 hours available in the agency, but it's not the type of capacity that is going to help us, we need to actually enter that data and figure out to that granularity so that we can move on, right? So if that fixes it, great. Otherwise, we move into the next step, right? If we're still off by more than 5%, we have to sort estimated time versus actual by project type, by role, and by individual within a report. And we need to begin analyzing this report. Okay. Is the project the type of issue? Right. So let's assume that the project is the actual issue that is governing this overage, right? Can we add more hours to increase price and then still be competitive? So, for example, like, if the reason that we're running out of capacity is because we're undercharging for things, because we're charging, for example, let's use easy numbers. We have a billable rate of $200, right? And we say this thing takes $1,000 to do. And, so we're estimating that that's going to take 5 hours, but if in reality, it takes us 10 hours. We should be charging $2,000 for that. So the question is, can we add in more hours to the estimate? Meaning like our current estimate before was 5 hours, now it's going to be 10 hours. And can we charge for that? And if the answer is yes, we just increase the price and then we move on. Because we increase the price, we also increase the amount of capacity of hours for that deliverable. If we can't add more hours because we can't add more money to it, we have to then move into deep diving standard operating procedures, right? Then we have to review the data on a per employee basis and figure out how to improve the SOP and cut down delivery time, right? Because again, if we're constrained because this thing takes $1,000 and this is what the market rate is, we can't charge $2,000. It is what it is. We have to try to bring down the number of hours that we use. Okay. The best way to do this is actually analyze the data, right? And find the best person that does it, and then get that person to redo the SOP, okay, for this step. So the number one person that's the best at delivering this rewrites the SOP. We retrain everybody on it, right? That's affected by the changes in this SOP, and then we go back to the top. Okay. So is then, as a double check, is the project type the issue of the overage? If it's still yes, we repeat this process. If no, because it shouldn't be by this point, we need to look at the specific roles. Okay. So first we look at projects. Now we're looking at roles. Okay. So are the roles a specific reason for the overage? Again, when you pull this data from your time tracking system, what you should be able to do is pull it by project, by role, and by individual. But we're not going to the individual side yet. We're going to the role depth at this point. So now we're double checking the roles. Again, can we add more hours for these roles and still be competitive? If the answer is yes, like increase the price because we're going to increase the hours for that role, not for the project overall, but for that role. Meaning like maybe we're taking hours from other places, and by them doing a better job at that thing, other people's efficiency goes up, which means that we can still kind of keep it all in line. And if we have to increase price a bit, so be it. But if we can't increase price, because again, we can't remain competitive, we have to figure out something else. So are the forms that transfer work from one role to another standardized, right? So are all the forms that transfer work to that role, do they A, exist, and B, are they being filled out properly to the guidelines on how to fill that thing out? So the easiest thing, that example that I can give you, is a creative brief. If the designer is getting the brief and they don't understand what to do, is the creative brief being filled out the way that it should be filled out? Okay. And there aren't just creative briefs, there's also digital briefs, video briefs. There's all kinds of briefs that an agency should have to communicate what the deliverable actually is. One of the major problems that happens when you see a specific role failing at delivering a certain type of project is that the brief is not being filled out well for that type of role. Or a specific person that is filling out the brief needs training on how to fill it out. Or number three, the person receiving said brief doesn't know how to read it and translate it properly, and they need training on that. So, look, if we need to basically fix how people are writing the forms and the briefs, we need to retrain them. We need to fix the forms and retrain people on how to write the briefs. Then we move into the next step, which really is about, well, maybe the SOPs off, right? Like the guidance that we've given people on how to actually execute the work, given a reasonable brief on how to actually do the work. So we have to, again, deep dive the data on this type of work for this type of role and figure out which employees are doing this work well, which ones need some helping hands, like they're going over on their time allocations, right? And we basically need to look at that, have the top performers of that task and or project rewrite the brief if needed, and then train the people that need a bit more help. Okay. And that's going to help cut down the time to delivery. So you want people that are ideally doing the work, A, very quickly, but B, at a very high quality level. Okay. Once you do that, retrain the staff affected by the SOP with this additional training. By the way, I assume that every SOP has a video guiding and training people. So it's sort of embedded in there. And once these changes have been affected, we come back to the top, right? So are there any specific roles that are still the reason for the overage? Again, like this is over a very long period of time. So like you're measuring this weekly, you're measuring this monthly to see if each one of these steps is actually moving the needle to generate more accuracy of pricing versus how long it takes to actually deliver. If all this work up to this point, or the role wasn't the actual problem of the overage to begin with, meaning like when you look at the role, like if you have, say, 4 or 5 designers and one person's off but the other 4 are on target for like this type of work, it's not really about the role anymore, because it's not like this systemic problem at a role level. We're now talking about the individual level. Okay. And this leads us to the third. So like stop number one was, is the type of project the problem? Number two was, is the specific role within the project the problem? Now we're looking at the bottleneck being the individual, the actual person that's in the specific role. Okay, so this is the example of 4 people are doing it right, one person is going over, and it's not accurate because of that. Because again, they're taking up way too much time to do this, which means that our capacity forecast is going to be off, right? Because we don't have as much capacity as we actually thought. So, is the individual the reason for the overage? Yes. Interview the specific employee to figure out what the cause of the overage is. Did you find the root cause? If no, assign a peer coach. This is the key step. You have to assign a peer coach, because sometimes as a manager, you don't remember how it is to do this task. And or if you're the operations person or the owner, you may not fully know the nuance of how to actually deliver that thing. So you have to assign this peer coach to deep dive and find the root cause, and then issue progressive training and coaching to actually fix the root cause of this issue. And once that is done, we get back into, is your revenue forecast correct? Because at that point, we have fixed everything. So I'm going to zoom out here quickly just to show you this. Okay. What we're really talking about is if the capacity forecast is off, there's only three things. Number one, is your project the thing that's out of whack? Yes or no? Is the role inside of the project the thing that's out of whack, or is it individuals within it? Okay. And then this is how you go about figuring out how to fix each one of these. Okay. Once this is fixed and reasonable, meaning your capacity forecast matches within 5%, like your actual versus the rear view mirror when you pull the data at the end of the month, and these things match up nicely, this is where we have to also focus on having an accurate revenue forecast. Because remember, it's not enough to just have a good capacity forecast. The revenue forecast needs to be in lockstep with it for this to actually generate the upside. Let's get into the revenue forecast because this is much easier. Is your revenue forecast accurate within 5% per month or less? Is the internal or the sales forecast inaccurate? So, like, look, there's only two paths here. Number one, sales is inaccurate. Okay. Is the sales forecast accurate within 20%? Okay. Now, here is a trick. When sales says that something is 80% likely to close, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean this month. So when sales believes that something is going to close, you have to remember that the likelihood that it closes this month is not 100%, it's 80%, but that is divided out by this month and probably next month. And depending on your sales cycle, like if you have a long sales cycle, it could even mean that it's going to close the month after that. Okay. So the weighting that you give this potential sales close should be 80% times 30% in the case of, 3-month window. So it should be one third, one third, one third. So it's not actually 80%. It's 80% overall for the next quarter. But in terms of planning out our capacity, it's one third of 80% this month, one third of 80% next month, and one third of 80% the month after that. Why this matters is that people overestimate how much is going to close this month because they say, oh, 80% close rate. It's 80, like, let's take into consideration 80% of that revenue because if we have 5 or 6 different proposals out there, the law of averages will kind of take care of it. And they're not wrong. It's just that the law of averages will take care of that with the assumption that it's all going to close this month, which it probably isn't. So you need to take into account the actual average length that a proposal takes to actually close and then account for that. For some firms, it's 1 to 2 months. Other firms, it's 2 to 3 months. Okay. So remember, 80% times how many average months it takes. If it's 2, 80% times 50% actually equals 40%. So you would contribute 40% of the theoretical close revenue to this month in order to create this accurate revenue forecast. Okay. That's it from the sales side. It's actually quite simple. It is largely subjective because salespeople are on average very, very optimistic that things are going to close and they're going to close absolutely this month, but it just generally doesn't happen that way. So that formula that I gave you is exactly how you mitigate for that. If the problem is internal, there's a few other steps. So is a revenue forecast made up of individual forecasts per client account manager? So what this means is that every client account manager or CAM is estimating the likelihood that this client is going to continue with us for the next 3 to 6 months. Okay. And so we need to create this revenue forecast by client account manager and then identify which client account managers are actually missing on forecasts versus reality and by what percent. Because here's the thing, just because, for example, our internal revenue forecast is, say, within 80%, what that generally means is that 1 or 2 people might be closer to the upper 90s in terms of accuracy, but other people might be at 60% accuracy in terms of how well they forecast. Okay. And it's very normal that 1 or 2 people are very accurate, 1 or 2 people are not so accurate. So we need to work with the people that are most inaccurate first and help them figure out how to actually do forecasting. So we need to create and amend a forecasting SOP on how this works. Then we need to coach the client account managers on the forecasting SOPs iteratively. Here's sort of the trick here. The way to do proper forecasting is that you take the theoretical amount that a client's going to pay us this, like next month, for example, and then you multiply that by a weighting percentage. That percentage should be the likelihood that we think that the client's actually going to follow through with it. So, for example, if there's a $10,000 project that the client is slated for in like 2 months from now, we would say, hey, we're going to collect $10,000 because we're actually going to deliver the entire project in that month, 2 months from now. The likelihood of them actually signing off on the project, in my opinion, is 80%. The weighted revenue would be the actual number, like the $10,000 times the likelihood that it's going to happen, 80%, because that's what I think, it's 80% likely to happen. The weighted revenue total is going to be $8,000 because 10,000 times 80% equals $8,000. Now you might say, but Nick, like, here's the thing. The revenue is either going to happen or it's not going to happen. It's like, it's black and white. It's a 0 or a 1, right? That's true. But when every single client account manager does this for every single account and every single project, the law of averages will take over and will actually generate the accuracy that you're looking for. As long as the percentage that the client account manager is estimating for is reasonably accurate. And how do we determine that? We look at their forecasts versus what actually happened, and we try to reverse engineer what their process is to actually like make this judgment call. Because there's clearly something about some of the clients are saying, behaving that the client account manager is not picking up on if their forecasts are vastly wrong month over month over month. But this is how, by this process, we fix this revenue forecast, which is both internal and external, meaning internal accounts, external new biz dev. So look, in summary, we need to fix two primary things. We need to fix the capacity forecast, which is the hardest thing, because for a capacity forecast to be fixed, what we need to do is actually determine the area of overage in the projects that we're quoting. And that happens either at the project level, at the role level, or at the individual level, right? The individual contributor level. Once we figure out what that is, we have to plug the hole by either increasing pricing to match as long as the market allows for it, or train the team and make the standard operating procedures and the training around it better so we can deliver it more efficiently. Really, that's what it comes down to, until we can get the capacity to match the reality of what we're allocating in terms of workload on a per person basis. That's phase one. Phase two, getting your revenue forecast right. The internal forecasting versus the biz dev forecasting. Again, when you do this and you do it well, I've seen agencies increase their profitability from the high single digits, 7, 8%, all the way to above 15% in additional profit per month, because they're no longer wasting internal hours on non-billable items. They are selling to their full capacity and keeping people nice and relatively full in a manageable way that mitigates burnout of the employee. If you want to see this full model, there'll be a link below this video. Click that and you're going to be able to download this somehow. And so you can follow this process step by step. Also, if you actually want a full audit on this, let me know. There will be a link to the audit below where you can book some time personally with me to go over this and any other problems that you may have.